This is Sports 225.
Oh, well, my buddy Sheldon Mickles, who covers LSU basketball for The Advocate and theadvocate.com and NOLA.com and all the other entities that is the newspaper now in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, joins me. And, well, your Tigers got off to a 12-1 start, and then the harsh reality of the SEC season has hit them right in the face. But what a fun team to watch. I really like watching this basketball team.
Yeah, they have been, and during the non-conference schedule, which was you don't want to call it soft, but he had to build it to where he had to get his foundation built, and there wasn't a lot of teams in that first 12 games that threw a scare in a lot of people. Wake Forest was a good opponent in Atlanta, and they came back from 20 down to win that one. Wofford, which is a pretty good team out in the Carolinas, they beat A&M at A&M a couple of weeks after LSU beat them. So after LSU beat Wofford, so they had a couple of good opponents in there, but mostly it was a mix of North Carolina Centrals and people like that, in the lower mid majors. So now that he's gotten into the SEC, it's a whole different world out there.
Well, when Matt McMahon took the job and obviously had a schedule before he got his roster, he couldn't overschedule. And you may not call it soft, but I'll call it soft. I mean, there were a couple of nice games in there, but that's smart though. You don't want to get a new team put together that maybe is under talented and get the brains beat out in November and December, right?
Yeah, and Kim Mulkey has alluded to the same thing a couple of weeks ago, that people were asking her about who they played, and she started making her schedule when she didn't have a lot of these transfers, and I think one of them obviously was Angel Reese, who's just knocking everybody's socks off and taking the league and the nation by storm with her, whatever it is, 16, 17 double-doubles, a fantastic player. But Kim talked about that you have to build your schedule according to your talent. And I think talking to Matt McMahon over the summer, that was the way he had to go about it. I'm sure he'll beef it up in the future, because when he was at Murray State, he played at Georgia, he played at Auburn, he played at Auburn last year. He played, I think, at Alabama. I think he played Mississippi State, maybe Ole Miss too. So he played a lot of upper level schools, Power 5 schools, and I think he's going to beef up the schedule when he gets everything in place. And right now they don't have everything in place. They have about 8 players and that they could count on, and in the last 3 games they just haven't been able to get over the hump. I mean, Kentucky, they played a fantastic game, could have come away with a win there. Of course, we're seeing what Kentucky's doing now, but they played a whale of a game there and was within a point twice in the last 2 minutes of the game. But it's what the SEC is, and the way the schedule, the SEC schedule was built, not very conducive to having a team of guys that hasn't been together for a long time.
Well, on top of that, and we'll get more in depth on it later, but they're coming off the 3 losses in a row and now face a really tough part of the schedule. So, but I don't know that you and I visited much since LSU hired Matt McMahon. I had him on early this year, back when we got back in August, so I could knock it out and get him on. And I was so impressed visiting with him. A real even-keeled guy, and his team plays a lot like his personality. I'm personally in favor of guys who are cool whether you're up 20 or down 20, and I like to see that reflected in the way the players play. But I assume you've enjoyed your time visiting with him from when he got the job.
Yeah, we've had 4 or 5 one-on-one conversations outside of weekly news conferences and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, he's a, you don't want to call him a CEO. I mean, I guess he is, but he's kind of, like you said, he's even keeled, and he kind of exudes that to his team. Right now they're struggling a little bit, so you hope they don't get frustrated and they don't start start looking at things, from the bottom side of the glass. I think he's not going to let that happen. Just like last night, they just didn't shoot the ball, and they turning the ball over. They're not shooting well. There's 2 games in a row they shot below 40%. They had done that only once all year. They came into the game tied for fourth with Florida, of all people, in field goal percentage, and Florida shot less than they did, all season long as well. So neither team shot the ball really well, although Florida found it in the second half and LSU didn't. Florida was 11 of 20 in the second half.
Well, from watching LSU, and it seems to be real simple. They are what they are. And if the other team shoots well, LSU's in trouble. And if the other team shoots poorly, LSU's got a chance. I know that's really basic and profound, but all other things being equal, that's what it seems to me from watching them so far through about, I guess, what are we at? 17 games, 16, 17 games so far. So
16 games, where exactly halfway, you play 31 games and then you have at least one in the SEC tournament. So they're at the halfway mark right now. Now, the next 4 games are going to tell us a lot about them. And if they can get through that, I mean, with any kind of confidence left, or, if they don't lose that confidence, which is kind of getting lower about a game. But, if they can get through that, they might have a good shot to win a few in the second half.
All right. Well, we're not at the halfway point yet of this show, so we've got to take this break. He's Sheldon Mickles. Read his stuff at theadvocate.com. I'm Lee Feinsbach at Sports 225.
Who says you need a vacation for a view like this? Or, I wish there was a place to get in shape. Try getting on the beaten path. Discover an ever-expanding network of trails and greenways. Some quintessential southern beauty. Or romp through the woods in a magical land between the rivers. There's more to explore than you ever imagined. Beyond the swing sets. Breck, we are more than a playground.
Back on Sports 225, talking some hoops with Sheldon Mickles. He covers LSU basketball in the SEC for The Advocate and theadvocate.com. Read his stuff every day, most days. There's no days off during basketball season. I remember Sheldon, back when I was the LSU basketball beat writer, I remember one month, and back in print, this was a big deal. I remember I had 45 bylines one March. And that was nuts, and I know exactly what, it's a long season for the teams, but it's a long season for the sports writer.
Yeah. And, I always tell people this, and I'm not complaining by any stretch of the imagination. You have people think they play 2 games in a week. Well, it's really 3 games in 8 days when you get to the SEC play. So, like I said, I'm not complaining. Then you have travel. Then you have, after you have to write stories the next day after a game. It's 3 games in 8 days. And, it makes January and February just fly by. I mean, before we know it, here we are, we're almost in the middle of January. We're going to be at the beginning of March, and we're looking at SEC tournament. We're looking at NCAA tournament, or, NIT tournament if possible. But it's quite busy, and it makes January and February fly by like nothing. So it is quite a stretch.
Old guy stories, because you remember, because you used to cover a little bit of basketball back in the day. Sheldon was a longtime Saints reporter for the State Times, may it rest in peace, and the Advocate, and before he moved over to basketball. But when I worked at the paper, we had a company plane, a really nice jet that sat about 8 with a pilot and a co-pilot too. And it was really easy to get around, and it made your life a lot more convenient as a sports writer and a lot less wear and tear on your body. They don't have that anymore. So when you go, you got to go commercial and, make your connection in Atlanta, because almost every SEC trip, you're either going to connect to Atlanta or have to drive. So, it can be a grind.
Yeah, it can. And a perfect example is the A&M game Saturday night. Went to the College Station and got through riding, and next thing you know, I'm on the road. I decided to stay in Houston, and came back through Houston, and on the way to Houston, the tornado warnings were going off. The rain was blowing sideways. People were driving with their flashers on. It was a grind to get back to Houston that night. And I don't mind the driving. We drive to we drive to A&M, the 2 Alabama schools and the 2 Mississippi schools, and we fly to most other places. So it's not that bad. So, but A&M's probably the longest drive we make, probably about 380 miles.
I'm 99% sure you were on the first road trip I made covering LSU basketball for the Advocate in January of '85. We flew into Nashville and it started snowing. Right. Am I right? You were on that trip, and we were doing like 2 miles an hour on the interstate. I remember it was so bad. I had to get out in the dark in the middle of a driving snowstorm and pee on the side of the road because we were going nowhere. And we finally got to the game. I don't think we came home that night.
I think we did, but it was about, I think the pilot, Herb Taft, I believe he told us that it was about 3 degrees when we took off, but it had snowed like it was like a blizzard. We were, it was interstate traffic, and we were on the way from the airport to the arena, and it snowed like crazy. And like you said, somebody had to go, and right there.
None of us expected that weather, if I recall. It wasn't like we were wearing snow boots and had winter coats and all that.
No, I don't think any of us were prepared for that, but it's part of it, and we've gotten. I don't know if you were in. I don't know if you were on this trip, but we had to go to Georgia one time, and we tried landing in Athens, and there was so much fog we had to turn around and go back to Atlanta. Then we had to drive to Athens, and I think we got to the game middle of the first half. So
no, what's worse is on that trip, I remember vividly too. We landed back in Baton Rouge at like 5 a.m. because you're right. We all had to write our stories. Then we had to drive from Athens to Atlanta, fly home. And when I walked up the walk to my house, the Advocate newspaper was waiting for me with our story in it. That's how long of a day it was.
Yeah, it was a long day that day, but it made travel easy. I mean, you could get back from Florida, you get back from Kentucky. We used to get back most of the time at 2 or 3 a.m. But then you sleep in your own bed, and it's not a big deal. But once again, I'm not complaining at all. I love doing what I do, and I love to travel.
I just love
part of the job.
Yeah, no, our stories from the old days, from when we had that plane and some of the things that we had to do. That's great that we were both on those 2 trips together. Yeah, and that was, and then we get to Vanderbilt, and this is still the case, right? The press box is still upstairs with no elevator, and I'm like, wait, we got to walk up like 4 flights of stairs with everything, with your, because back then too, our computers were not lightweight like today. Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother story for another day about old guys' computers.
But I'll tell you about Vanderbilt. For a while, when I got back on the beat in 2014, for a while we were seated down, at floor level.
Really?
Actually, it was a suite that was, like 1 level up, so it wasn't bad. And they had suites for the media, 2 or 3 suites that had all the media. Well, a couple of years ago, Kent Lowe said they don't have a seat for you down anywhere, so you have to sit next to John Brady. Well, I sat next to John Brady, put the headphones on, and just listened the whole time. It was great. But, as you know, that you're sitting below the court level there because you're down in what they call an orchestra pit or whatever it's called. But then last year, they put us back up in what I call the crow's nest. So it was quite the going back in time. So it was like things are supposed to get better, but they went back in time on that one.
Yeah, well, we'll leave it at that. We go to this break, and we are now past the halfway point, Sheldon. So that's cool, sitting by the radio crew, Chris Blair and John Brady, the former LSU coach, who's fun to listen to during a game. He's a great analyst. Anyway, speaking of great analysts, you got to read Sheldon's stories when he covers LSU basketball at theadvocate.com. And you prolific on social media because you have to be?
Yes, I have to be. I'm old, but I do have a Twitter account. It's called @Mickles Advocate. @Mickles Advocate.
All right. I'm Lee Feinsfog at Sports 225, and we'll be right back.
says you need a vacation for a view like this? Or, I wish there was a place to get in shape. Try getting on the beaten path. Discover an ever-expanding network of trails and greenways. Some quintessential Southern beauty. Or romp through the woods in a magical land between the rivers. There's more to explore than you ever imagined. Beyond the swing sets. Breck, we are more than a playground.
Back on Sports 225, talking hoops with Sheldon Mickles. He covers LSU and the SEC for The Advocate. We were talking a lot about this particular LSU team and the tough stretch it's going through. And then last segment, you missed some old guy travel stories, which were kind of fun. So the SEC is not the same old SEC this year because Kentucky is not great and struggling. I still wouldn't bet against them to make a nice NCAA tournament run, but you got a whole, it feels like a whole different look. And part of that's maybe the byproduct of so many new coaches coming in and the transfer portal, thoughts about all that?
Well, yeah, you look at it, it's kind of like the NFL was this year. It's kind of topsy-turvy. I mean, who knew the New York Giants were going to make the playoffs this year? They've been down for several years. The Lions almost made the playoffs. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who won one game a couple of years ago, made the playoffs. The Tennessee Titans, who almost got to the Super Bowl last year, didn't make the playoffs. So it's kind of crazy. Similar to that is the SEC so far through 4 games, and a couple of teams still have to play tonight. But I guess you look at Kentucky 1-3. You look at LSU 1-3. Missouri has a new coach, and they've done well. You look at Arkansas, it was 1-2, and I want to say, they could have been. They played Missouri in the game they won, so they're the only team that beat Missouri in conference. So it's kind of turned around. You have 5 new coaches in the league, and if you count Mike White, who went to Georgia, so 5 different schools, 5 schools have new coaches this year. So it's been kind of hard to gauge at the beginning. And look, Georgia beat Auburn last week, gave Auburn its first loss in conference play. So you think of Auburn, Tennessee. Now, Tennessee and Alabama are clearly the cream of the crop in the SEC and ranked 4th. Alabama's 4th in the nation, Tennessee's 5th. You look at those 2 teams and they look head and shoulders, obviously, above the rest, because you really don't know what Missouri has got, even though they've done well so far, 2-1 in the league. But obviously Alabama and Tennessee are the teams to beat. Unfortunately, LSU has to play both of those teams in the next 2 Saturdays. So one at Alabama, and then they also play Tennessee here next Saturday. So it's going to be a tough stretch for LSU, who also during that stretch have to go to Arkansas, which is going to be mad after losing LSU here. And they also play Auburn next Wednesday night. So all 4 of those teams are nationally ranked, and it's going to be a tough road to hoe here in the next couple of 3 weeks.
There's when you say 5 new coaches, I mean, just think about the rollover. Of course, they got one coach going from Florida to Georgia, and they had an interesting matchup the other day. By the way, we're doing this on Wednesday, which is the day after Florida beat LSU, so that's why Sheldon doesn't have all the results of the Wednesday night games. But to your point, it's kind of fun and unpredictable, though. That part is, for instead of it just being the same old in Kentucky,
I picked, it still isn't, it's got a long way to go, but I picked Tennessee to win the league in the SEC media poll. I picked Tennessee. I just thought they've done well, and they haven't lost a lot of guys, and then they picked up. They lost 2 really good freshmen last year, but they've kind of filled that in. They filled in with a couple of transfers, so they're playing really well. And they lost a game early. I can't remember who it was, like the first week of the season, maybe the second week of the season. They lost a game early, and I think maybe some people got down on them. But they've certainly moved back up. I think I had marked it down. Alabama beat Kentucky by 26 Saturday, and Tennessee beat South Carolina by like 40. Between the 2, it was like 68 points. They won their games. And then Tennessee beat South Carolina by 40. And guess who South Carolina beats for their first SEC win last night? Kentucky at Rupp Arena. So I mean, look, I talked about it, having LSU having Kentucky on the ropes. Kentucky could be 0-4 right now, sitting here 0-4. I mean, LSU never got down behind more than 8 points at Rupp Arena. They never stopped fighting. They kept, keep making plays. They were doing what they had to do at the end, to hang in there, and they almost pulled that one out. And if Kentucky would really be in trouble if they had lost out. I saw John Calipari on ESPN Sports Center, and he looked really down. He's taking responsibility like all coaches, good coaches do. And he's just having, a tough go of it. I mean, you got the best rebounder in the country and Oscar Tshiebwe, and he's got some really good 5-star talent against a couple of freshmen, but they just haven't been able to do it. They lost a couple of games in non-conference, and now they're struggling in the conference play.
He is Sheldon Mickles. He covers LSU basketball in the SEC for theadvocate.com. We got just a few minutes left when we come back from this break on Sports 225.
Who says you need a vacation for a view like this? Or, I wish there was a place to get in shape. Try getting on the beaten path. Discover an ever-expanding network of trails and greenways. Some quintessential southern beauty. Or romp through the woods in a magical land between the rivers. There's more to explore than you ever imagined. Beyond the swing sets. Breck, we are more than a playground.
Coming down the home stretch of another Sports 225, go to sports225.com to get all the show listings of when we're here on Cox 4, which is your view. Sheldon Mickles with me. He covers LSU for The Advocate. And Sheldon, when it comes time for March, when the selection's made, I'm going to do what I do every year. I'm going to pick Purdue to win. Every single year I pick Purdue to win. This year, Purdue is actually number one for one of 5 number 1 teams, I guess, this year, but they're really good. Who from the SEC can win the national championship this year?
I think Alabama has a really good shot. I mean, they're already being touted as a Final Four team. I mean, Brandon Miller is an exceptional player. They have a guy named Mark Sears who came from Ohio U that LSU played against him last year. Really good guard. And then they have some couple of bigs, and they have a lot of, they can play defense. Nate Oates, has a really good defensive concept scheme, and they're going to be tough to beat, especially in the SEC. And then, they're going to make a lot of noise in the NCAA. I think Tennessee probably has a good shot to make, like an Elite Eight. I think both of those teams have a really good shot. But beyond those two, Auburn, a lot of people are down on Auburn a little bit, even though they've only lost 2 games, I think, all year, 2 or 3. Lost 1 in the conference. But I think a lot of people are down on them nationally in the AP poll, but I think those are the top 3. Mississippi State was up there a little bit. They have a new coach, of course, but then they dropped back. So they like LSU. They had a really good non-conference season, and then they've had a little trouble in the SEC, getting going in the SEC. Of course, they played Alabama in the first conference game, so that didn't help.
Right. So this LSU team, realistically, with a nice second half, is an NIT team, right? If it were to somehow steal a win or 2 here in these games, this tough stretch coming up, maybe NCAA consideration, but I think that's realistic and would be a wonderful accomplishment for this team.
Yeah, I think NCAA, I didn't check this morning yet, but the net ranking yesterday was number 89. So that's not good for the NCAA. But if they were to get, 18, 19 wins, if they could get 6 or 7 here in the conference, they play Texas Tech in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. Those are going to be some tough games, but if they could get to 18, say 19, maybe win a game in the SEC tournament, I think they'd be an NIT team for sure.
Well, you're an NCAA performer. He's Sheldon Mickles. He covers LSU for The Advocate. Sheldon, always great to catch up, man. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you. Always a pleasure.
And thank you for watching Sports 225.
At carnival time by Baton Rouge Bay, that's the site of my story. at Spanish Town Mardi Gras. Things can get blurry